Let's roll back to our first story tonight on the 48,000 naira minimum wage as proposed by the federal government. Ahmed Husaini is joining us now. Let's just confirm that you can hear us. Ahmed, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
So my first question to you earlier was, this took a bit of time. We heard there was negotiations. Numbers were flown around, 600, 200. How surprised are you by federal government submission and, of course, the NLC and TUC's response?
Yeah, actually, I'm a little bit surprised because everyone was expecting the federal government to make some offer that is at least twice. And there's something around 60,000 naira or even 50,000 naira, but going below, to 48,000 naira, is actually quite a surprise, and I think it's going to be a big disappointment on the side of the NUC and the NLC. The TUC and the NLC. That's the entire organized labor. But then, actually, this is a negotiation, and when you are going through negotiations like that, you have to understand that both parties will try to actually maximize their own outcomes. So the NLC, the organized labor, is asking for 615,000 naira. The federal government is offering 48,000 naira. So you can see there's a lot of gap. There is a huge gap between them. So we're not even talking about dozens of possible agreements. So we don't even know. There's not a possible middle ground that they can come actually without one party appearing to lose out in the whole game.
Is there any possibility that the federal government is just playing tough and that there is still room for further negotiations, especially with the labor unions coming out to say this goes nowhere, it's not realistic in the current economic situation we have?
So what is clear is that the federal government does not have the money to actually meet the demands of the organized labor. Does not have the money to actually pay 650,000 naira. Even if the federal government is able to, meet some of their demands halfway, then we have to also consider there are states, subnationals, that may not be able to actually comply, or actually be able to pay this minimum wage. And that has been the problem that we've been facing. Even the 30,000 naira minimum wage that we are currently, complaining about, is not actually being paid at some states and local governments. So you can see it is not just the issue of the federal government, but the issue of the entire labor force in the country. And then if you're looking at what the federal government can afford to do, then we have to say that the federal government actually needs to actually consider its own strategy. Is it actually pursuing a collaborative win-win strategy, or it's actually pursuing a competitive win-lose strategy? Because if it is pursuing a zero-sum game, then definitely there's not going to be any negotiated agreement with the organized labor, and we're going to see a lot of protests, strikes, and other industrial actions against the government, which could actually exacerbate into some kind of political crisis, and generally. So, but if the government is actually pursuing a collaborative, win-win solution, then they have to sit down with the organized labor, explain to them the financial, situation of the country and what they can actually really afford. But before doing that, before asking the Nigerian workers to make sacrifices, the government also needs to make some sacrifices, because you cannot ask Nigerian workers to actually sacrifice, on the minimum wage issue, while the government is spending billions of naira on some profligacies, on some, to service the luxuries of, those in power, buying, jeeps, SUVs, and other things that, in no way actually painting, the economic and social reality that ordinary Nigerians are going through.
The unions are already complaining about the credibility of the negotiation process. They also talk about a lack of trust. There is a very fine line here between the federal government and labor unions. What is at risk, and what must federal government do to avoid a situation where negotiations just go to a standstill?
Yeah, so I think the federal government actually has the upper hand in this case, because the federal government actually introduced some policies without producing or putting on the table any mitigating scenario or circumstances, like the removal of fuel subsidies, the flotation of the naira, and all those things that actually led to exacerbating a rising cost of living across the country. So the federal government now has the upper hand, because the organized labor is actually playing catch up with the government. It is the government that is actually introducing one policy after the other, while promising the organized labor of reviewing the minimum wage. May 1st has passed, there's not any minimum wage in place, and then we're actually running against time. So in this case, the organized labor has little leverage over the federal government, because the federal government would consider that the most that they can go is maybe to start some strike action or some kind of protest. But as long as Nigerians are hungry and people have to go out to eke out their living to get what they're going to eat, to get their next meal, then such kind of actions are actually not going to be effective, because people that you expect to cooperate in the strike actually also depend on going out, in order to actually be able to meet, their needs economically. So that's what is at stake. If you look at, if the organized labor now intends to walk away, then they have little leverage, on forcing or on regulating the behavior of the federal government. Oh. But so in that case, they actually need to come together and try to see how not just the federal government, but other, states at the subnational level, other governments at the subnational level, to see how they can actually reach some form of negotiated settlement that is acceptable to the organized labor, to the Nigerian citizens, and also that the government can really afford, considering the current economic realities.
Ahmed, thank you for speaking with us.
It's my pleasure.